Hey everyone, I thought I'd give a quick update about a magical working that I've been doing. I suppose it could be considered a mystical working. Um, Kind of rides that line. A lot of times magicians wind up doing both. So, what I have done over the last 11 days, which I just finished up tonight, is a recitation of the first stanza of the Qasida Ghousia. I think I'm pronouncing that right. If not, let me know in the comments. This is a poem that it's a beautiful poem that is written in the Sufi tradition, and I am not a Muslim, but I have developed a lot of respect for the Muslim, the uh, the Islam tradition and religion. So I figured, well, let me give this a shot because it just seemed like it. First of all, the stanza struck me as very beautiful, and second of all, I really liked the whole promise of it, which was about developing. The stanza itself reads in English, "Cups of union the beloved gave me to drink, so I told my wine advance towards me." So I'll get to the text of that in a second because reciting that over and over again, it's literally suffusing you with meaning as you go. But anyway, the whole idea of that is that you're going to, the effect of it is supposed to be that you are able to develop or to obtain or to win over the favor of Allah Ta'ala, which is to say the highest, higher than you can imagine, Allah. So, I'm always down for being in touch with divinity, and certainly gaining the favor of it, or him, or however you prefer to view divinity. Um, so so that was kind of the main rationale about why I wanted to do that. And furthermore, this whole idea of union is certainly a make what's that old joke? What did the Zen master say to the when buying a hot dog? He said, "Make me one with everything." To the hot dog vendor. Anyway, so that's the whole idea. Obviously, it's unlikely that a Zen master would be eating meat, but anyway, um, it depends. I guess it depends on the practitioner. Anyway, the whole idea is that there's this idea in Buddhism of understanding everything as united whole. And in fact, as I was going through this, I wound up reviewing some of the tenets of Buddhism, which is one of which is emptiness, which is to say things are empty of an inherent existence. So you might have seen a recent video where I was looking at the heart itself as having lacking an inherent existence, which is really hard for us, I think, in the West, and maybe even with other traditions where we tend to think of the heart as, well, this is the most me thing that I have, right? Crowley might call it the ipsissimus, the most me, the meest me, the selfiest self, right? So anyway, but in Buddhism, that's not a thing. No me gusta, right? We don't like that. So anyhow, I don't like that. So anyway, the whole idea anyway of emptiness is that things lack an inherent existence. So they, it could be anything. And this was something when I did my reconstructed Jebafal ritual the first time, which, like I always emphasize that it was a reconstruction, that it was not, that it's using elements that probably weren't available to Dee and Kelly. But the whole idea of it is that, things lack an inherent existence. And I found like my heart sort of came out, created like two different beings which were arguing with each other. One is things as they are, and the other one is like the opportunity cost, and they were fighting. This is I'm what I am, yes, but, and so I deserve to be here. And the other part is like, yeah, but I am equally valid, I should be here, that sort of thing. Anyway, that was a fun little experience as I was doing that. So, anyhow, I shouldn't like say it was a little experience. It was an important experience. But anyway, so the idea of a lack of inherent existence, of emptiness, is that, it sort of allows us some flexibility, right? And it gives us the promise of change, right? That change is possible, including in ourselves, right? And as a matter of fact, Buddhism goes even farther and says there is no core self, so that's another thing that I returned to as I was reciting this. So, what was my method? So, this is probably where you're interested in how I went about it. So, the method that I was instructed on the website that I got this from, multiple websites said this, so it was confirmed, which is that you're to recite the first stanza of the poem 1,000 times per day. So it took me maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours every day, partly because, I had this tap app on my phone to tap count, and that was a little distracting because then sometimes, you get addicted to the phone and you're like, oh, I'll just wait. But anyway, I did wind up getting 1,000 done every day. And again, the goal is to like sort of have union. And what I realized is what doing this practice actually helped was returning me. I already mentioned emptiness, but it returned me to some of the what's known in Buddhism as obscurations. So just briefly, the idea is that we all have a Buddha nature. We all can become Buddhas, and we all can, get rid of this idea, grasping at this self, which is like this whole false concept. It's a delusion, basically, So, after, having done the Enochian Aethers, you strip away a lot of that, but there's still like little things, it's as you go along the magical path, the stuff you're working with gets subtler and subtler as you go along. So what I did was I went ahead and as I was going through reciting the stanza, the whole idea of union with all beings, all sentient beings, became, I realized what was holding me back was some of this still residual delusion, and I had to like kind of work through this, these things that distract you or whatever. And there's somebody online who had already pointed out, hey, you got to work more on some of these Buddhist things. And I say, okay, so I wound up doing that, and what I realized is I really need to focus more on emptiness, right? And that whole idea. So I did the scrying of the empty heart, and I also really doing so really helps this whole idea of understanding that all things are basically just originating, based on dependent circumstances, right? So that dependent origination. So emptiness means it lacks an inherent existence, and therefore this arising is just based on certain circumstances. So emptiness also is very core to this idea of absolute bodhicitta. So briefly, bodhicitta is this idea that is sort of one of the core fundamental things that you're working on as you go along in Buddhism. Is you want all beings to sort of have, like, it literally means awakened mind, or a Buddha mind, which is that you want, my hair is doing funny things, which is that you want all sentient beings to be free from suffering. And in order for that to happen, they can all be awakened, basically, and can transcend their suffering, which is the whole point of Buddhism, right? That's the fourth noble truth, is that suffering can be transcended. so so anyway, in working through this, it was like, okay, I want all sentient beings to have that. But so that's kind of like the main thing. So relative bodhicitta is this idea that, okay, I really want to help sentient beings, right? And that's really good. That's a really good start to bodhicitta. As you develop along, you start realizing there's this absolute bodhicitta, because as you learn about the teachings of Buddhism, and they sort of like get you develop a right view, which is to say right philosophical view. It's one of the eightfold noble paths. It's one of the things that you're supposed to do as you go along, is develop a right view and act according to that eightfold noble path. Apparently it's the thing that Buddha kept on going back to. So and that's kind of what the tradition has continued for thousands of years, which is, really working on refining that right view, and having more and more takes and discussions and stuff like that. An unbroken philosophy for 2,500 years of people working through that. Western philosophy, it's joked about being notes to Plato, but in Buddhist philosophy, it's notes to Buddha. It's footnotes to Buddha, right? Footnotes to Plato, footnotes to Buddha. So anyway, the whole idea is then that you start realizing, oh, you know, all sentient beings are also sort of arising dependent, via dependent origination. And, they also sort of lack a core self. So if you want to actually help them out, you need to sort of realize that every circumstance you're going through is dependent origination, and every circumstance everybody else is going through is dependent origination. So you're really trying to then, if you can come at things from emptiness and just sort of realize with a view of how things are, reality, nothing is ever objective, but if you can see things as they are in the circumstances as they develop and arise for you, then suddenly, okay, I can act, according to wisdom, which is, kind of the ability to see things as they are. So all of this is kind of like heady stuff, but at the same time, it's really driven from this compassion. There's this discussion of like the practice. I forget. I can't quote the person. Somebody else can look. You all can look it up. But the idea of like two wings of the practice is compassion on one side and wisdom on the other, and that is sort of how you like make progress through your practice. So that's the whole goal, right? Is to make things better for everybody. That's the Buddhist thing, and that's why I kind of land on that. Regardless of the entities that I work with, or even with the divine as a whole, or the whole divine intelligence. For me personally, in terms of what I want out of that, is something that is sort of, at least in this life, in this human body, is I want things to be better for everybody, and, suffering is the hardest thing about it. And let's fix that. And that's a long process. That's probably millennia long process, but hey, it's worth it. So anyway, so as I was going along, what were some of the effects? So I kept on being drawn back to, okay, I'm going to be united with all sentient beings. I'm going to need to have this idea of fundamental perfect interpenetration, which is this idea that all things are sort of mutually contained within each other, all phenomena. So that's, the second part, the dependent origination, is another one. Like, we're all kind of like coming up from this stuff, but we all have this emptiness of inherent existence. Those three things, dependent origination, emptiness, and perfect interpenetration of phenomena, are the three core tenets of what's known in major, most branches of Buddhist philosophy, maybe the exception of Theravada, I'm not sure. But in a lot of East Asian, anyway, philosophies, is this idea of Indra's net. Indra, and South Asian too, I would assume. So, so this idea of Indra's net, and that's sort of like all these like connections that we have with each other, but the individual nodes that we are not nodes that continue perfectly, basically, that are like fundamental, immutable things. They're changeable. They're all subject to change. Okay, so these were things that I kept on returning to, and then being able to do that, suddenly this compassion and this desire to help suddenly had a place to go. It was a better experience, and it also made the union possible, right? So this concern, this deep concern, a well of concern for all sentient beings, was only was the thing that enabled this union, right? Enabled that experience of union with all sentient beings. So this was very important, right? So we've got this tension between various philosophies and stuff like that. That sort of got resolved as I actually worked on the practice, and then suddenly, I was able to have this union with all sentient beings. About halfway through, I did have, an encounter with Allah, and it was much more personal of a deity feeling than other, it was like encountering Zeus, or it was like there was it was a personal deity feeling to me. Now maybe that's just me and my experience and my my own subjectivity, in terms of like a universal deity. I didn't really feel that the same way I felt Enochian. I'm just telling you the experience that I had. I'm not necessarily saying, therefore, theologically, blah, blah, blah. I'm just telling you what I experienced. That being said, certainly a very, very vast and very powerful deity. So the sense that and it was very, I got a lot of benevolent feelings and blessings from him. So and then towards the end, so that was about halfway through, but I continued to like work on on developing and maintaining the right view, and thereby having able to cultivate even more and more bodhicitta for all sentient beings. And then finally, what happened towards the end tonight, minutes ago, less than an hour ago, was that I was getting a sense of a very close relationship with Jelani, who is the author of the Qasida Ghousia, or Ghausia, or again, I apologize for not necessarily pronouncing it correctly. I'm reading it as that. By the way, I did say it in the Arabic as it was transliterated into Roman letters, and I don't read Arabic script, and I don't speak Arabic, but I did my best based on the way it should sound, let's put it that way, to other times I've heard Arabic and the way it was written out. So I recited it that way. So the main thing is that I had, sorry, my phone ran out of storage. The main thing I wanted to say is that, meeting with him, it was very wonderful. There was very much a sense of like a heart alignment, with my heart with his heart, and the sense that, he would, be around, serve as, a guide, a mentor, all of the good things, right? And, we had this encounter where it seemed like we were almost like at a picnic, just kind of, casually, discussing. There was like a little fire pit, and, there was, it seemed like we were in a meadow, kind of in a spring day or morning or whatever. And, with the stream coming by and a few large trees. And it was wonderful. And again, it was a sense of fellowship. So what's the main takeaway from this? Why would you do this? In my case, I found it very uplifting. And, I felt like, based on the way it has been presented online, that I didn't get the sense that this was a closed practice, right? That this was an open practice for other people. Not necessarily, advertised to other people that way, but the sense I got that it was an open practice. And Sufism is known for that. So I went ahead and obviously respectfully, and not being like, I'm entitled to this, but more just, and this, you go along as a magician, you kind of will get a sense really quick, like, you're not supposed to be here, and I never got that sense. And it was a very loving and open and, again, very benevolent experience. So anyway, and this is the other main thing is to show that, different practices can build with each other, assuming on each other, right? Again, I do identify as Buddhist. I still will work Enochian practice. I still will work, in this case, Sufi practice, or work with, the Hellenic pantheon, or the Egyptian pantheon, or Mesopotamian pantheon. I will work with all of these. Why? Because spirit is spirit, and all spirits, we can benefit each other, no matter where one is from. And in my case, I'm also looking to make sure that all spirits of whatever variety are free from suffering. Okay. So anyway, that was a longer video than I anticipated, but that was the how-to. So the how-to, again, say it alone, recite 1,000 times a day. If you can do it relatively quickly, that's great. I discovered, some of the ways to say it faster is for me to, instead of, repeating it in a high pitch, I repeat it in a low pitch, that way you're not using as much breath per recitation. It's a silly thing, but if you're looking to save time, you can do that. So that's my update. I'm still looking for work. If you're enjoying these videos, and you, would like to support, the free content, I put a link in the channel, that to show you, that you can, send $1 or $2 here and there, or not at all if you can't afford it. That's fine. So I think that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Again, I really do appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your day or evening, or whatever the case may be. Bye.